In this presentation, I want to discuss 8 success tips to win your or your spouse's I-601 waiver case. Perhaps you've went to someone to assist you and you've been told that for your spouse to win a green card, he or she will have to return home. They will have to go abroad to an interview. But to return, they're going to need to be granted a waiver. That's a 601 waiver. It forgives a person's time spent here in the United States without permission. Without it, they cannot return legally from abroad. Or perhaps you've heard a horror story. Someone you know, an uncle, an aunt, a cousin, an in-law, has lost their waiver. If that's the case, I can almost assure you that they've committed one of the mistakes that I'm going to cover in these 8 tips, and maybe several of them. So let's get started. The first tip is that you must play an active role in your case. A lot of individuals go to an attorney or some legal assistant and they tell them their story and they're told that they need a waiver, and the individual helping them does the work, but without much interaction, without much interplay from the spouses, from the immigrant who needs the waiver and from the spouse that's petitioning and sponsoring them. In those cases, there's bound to be problems for a simple reason. The person helping you doesn't know your family situation. They only know the little snapshot that they're given at that point in time. And if the person is not actively engaged in preparing the paperwork, more often than not, there's going to be a lot of very useful, critical evidence that's not being presented to the government. And I-601 cases turn on the evidence. In other words, those who practice immigration law, like me, we have no magic. We have no magic pixie dust that we can just throw out there and assure your victory. It's all based on preparation and hard work and interaction with our clients. So you must play an active role in your case. You must take a hands-on role. You must take responsibility. What happens if you don't? I'll give you a situation. When I first opened my Riverside office, coming up from San Diego, the very first individual that came to me for a consultation came because his wife was stuck in her home country because she had lost, she did not even present an I-601 waiver. The individual helping him didn't even put the package together. And the U.S. citizen spouse that came to me had no clue that it was even needed. They had not been actively engaged in the case. They didn't question the person helping them. They didn't really help them prepare anything. The spouse went off their interview and was told by the government officer, "Where's your waiver?" The fellow didn't have one. You have to play an active role. Because even if that person had went to their interview with some information, given the type of assistance that they had received, it's highly likely it would not have been sufficient to win a waiver. Why do I say that? Tip number 2, you must understand the requirement of hardship. You must understand extreme hardship. If you can present evidence showing an extreme hardship to a United States citizen parent or spouse, or a lawful permanent resident parent or spouse, then the immigrant has shown extreme hardship to what is known as a qualifying relative. Extreme hardship is victory. Ordinary hardship, average hardship, is defeat. It's losing. Compare these terms. If an individual says, if my husband cannot return from Mexico, I will suffer great discomfort. Versus, if my husband can't return from Mexico, we're going to suffer a disaster. If my husband can't return from his home country, my family will suffer a misfortune. Versus, if my husband can't come back to the United States, we are going to be in tremendous misery. If my wife can't come back to the United States, that's going to be a great displeasure. Versus, if my wife can't come back to the United States, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to be in a situation of desperation. There's so many things she does. Very different. And those words I share with you because they mean something. The evidence behind a discomfort situation is not going to be as thorough as the evidence behind a disaster situation. The evidence behind a misfortune situation is not going to be as strong as the evidence in a misery situation. The evidence showing circumstances of displeasure are going to be very different than the evidence that shows circumstances of desperation. So you must understand extreme hardship. Then you're going to have to go out and prove it. Tip number 3, which I alluded to a moment ago, is your qualifying relatives. You must know your qualifying relatives. I mentioned them in the previous example. Your U.S. citizen parent or spouse, or your lawful permanent resident parent or spouse are the ones whose hardship will count. So when you're presenting the information for the provisional waiver for your spouse to come back into the United States, you build the case around your qualifying relatives. I've seen many situations where people come in and they've been told that their parent will need a waiver. Okay, your parent's going to need a waiver. Does your parent have a spouse? No. Well, then who's the qualifying relative? You're the child. Perhaps you're the person that's petitioned the parent, but you don't count for purposes of qualifying relative. So where's the qualifying relative? You have to have the qualifying relative. It's a pillar to success. And around that person, you build the evidence to show that the hardship that person will suffer upon being separated from the immigrant that can't return is extreme, not ordinary. Tip number 4, explain the totality of your anticipated losses. By that, I'm referring to indirect factors of hardship. A moment ago, I was referring to direct factors to the qualifying relative. But let's say the qualifying relative, in this case, the parent, goes abroad and has a spouse. But the spouse's hardship alone, the United States citizen's hardship alone, doesn't rise to a level of extreme. It's maybe a little better than ordinary, but it's not moving into the shade of being extreme yet. However, you're the child, the sponsor, the parent for immigration benefits. What's your relationship with the parent? What's the grandchildren's relationship, if you have any, with your parent? What's the relationship of other brothers and sisters, of other family members who may not count directly for hardship, but it's very likely, indirectly, the pressure that the U.S. citizen's spouse or permanent resident spouse will feel upon the separation of their immigrant wife? How much pressure will they feel? Is it great? Will it increase their hardship? Well, then the indirect hardship of those individuals upon the United States citizen will count as an indirect factor, as an indirect hardship. So you have to explain the totality of the anticipated losses. And some individuals ask me, well, then what do you mean by anticipated loss? Some people really struggle understanding this concept. Well, imagine this. Your spouse, the immigrant spouse, is killed in a car accident tonight. Will that change your life tomorrow? Absolutely. How's it going to change your life tomorrow? A lot. I know that. Can you tell me? Can you discuss all the changes that you're going to have to make in your life, in your daily routines, that your children will have to make, that perhaps your in-laws and grandparents will have to make, that you'll have to make in work, your childcare arrangements? All of those factors are part of an anticipated loss, are part of an anticipated suffering that you're going to go through. Now, as I'm going through this right now, I venture to say you can see that. You can see that point that if your spouse leaves this earth due to a car accident tonight or tomorrow, you can see what will occur to you. Now, you have to take that same type of approach to understanding what will happen if your spouse cannot return to the United States. Clearly, it's the same thing, because this individual that is such an integral part of your life, such an important part of your everyday existence, is now removed from the picture. You have to be able to explain the totality of your anticipated loss. Tip number 5, and it goes along with everything we discussed so far. Tell your family story, not just random details. Even though your qualifying relatives are a small group of individuals, as you can see in the examples of someone that dies in a car accident and someone that can't return to the United States, there are effects trickling out all around you, all around your story. It's going to affect your story of your whole family. And so you need to tell the story of your family. The law doesn't say that. Common sense does. Because there are connections between individuals who depend on each other on a day-to-day basis. And those connections are, in the real world, factors of hardship. And they can be, in the legal world, in the I-601 waiver world, factors of hardship. You have to bring them together. And there's another reason, perhaps even more significant. When I was in college, I was a journalist, and I got to interview one of the greatest journalists in American history, Charles Kuralt. He had a show where he interviewed individuals every Sunday night on television for an hour, and he told their story. Every story was heartwarming, inspirational, authentic. It made you feel passion for that person. It made you like that person. When I interviewed Mr. Kuralt, I asked him how he chose those individuals. He explained the process. And then he told me something that I will never, ever ever forget. He said, every individual has a special story. Every individual has a Pulitzer Prize story. They just need the right storyteller. So you, the immigrant spouse, the U.S. citizen spouse, the children in the family, every single individual has a special story, special dreams, special goals, special obstacles they have to overcome. Put it all together. Tell your story. You have to tell it in a way so that it connects with the requirements of immigration law. But you can do it. And you do it with a mindset that you're telling a story, a family story. You're going to use the relevant factors of a family story, not just random facts. Oh, my husband has bad health. Oh, my husband earns so much money. Oh, we have 3 kids and they're in the 5th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. Come on. Those are random facts. Put it together. Tell the story. Tip number 6, do not minimize community service. So often I read comments by other lawyers and by organizations that train on waivers, and they tend to lean toward the proposition that you want to keep things narrow. You want to just highlight the key factors for immigration adjudicators, for officers who's going to review the 601 applications. I disagree. I think things like community service are important. I think the more an individual, an immigrant, a United States citizen, spouse of an immigrant, the more they are role models to their children, to their community, the greater they're going to be able to show their loss will be. The greater they will be able to show the hardship they will suffer. Role models are good. It could be, let's say, feeding the homeless once a month on Friday nights. The immigrant spouse, the U.S. citizen spouse, volunteer their time and they feed the homeless. The immigrant spouse coaches or referees in the youth sports league. Every Saturday and every Wednesday, they're donating time. It could be they're teaching reading at the library to young kids every Tuesday and Thursday night. Those in and of themselves are just facts. But when you weave it into a story, they show a role model. They show a person who cares about their family. They show individuals who are teaching their children to be good citizens. And if the immigrants removed from that equation, what's going to happen to those lessons? It's going to have an impact on those children. And because it has an impact on those children, it's going to have an impact on the U.S. citizen spouse indirectly. Certainly it affects her directly because couples do these things together, whether they feed the homeless together or one makes arrangements for the other to go. It's a couple thing. It's a together thing. Role models are important. And I believe that every officer looks at items like that, looks at evidence like that. They may not calculate it directly, but internally it has to have an impact. For all this discussion in immigration law about good families, good immigrants, bad immigrants, it comes down to a simple formula. It comes down to when I was very young and John F. Kennedy was giving his inaugural speech as he became president of the United States. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. If you can do that, you can show you're giving to the country. Not taking, but you're giving. giving freely of your time, of your money, of your energy, of your knowledge, of your skills. Yes. Tell your community service. Share your community service. Tell your family story. Explain the totality of your anticipated losses. Tip number 7. But do not exaggerate. Some individuals, upon questioning, will say, well, if I go home, I can't find a job. Well, why not? Well, they don't have jobs like this in where I live. Well, where you plan to go? Well, look, I'm going to this place. And are there any stores? Let's say, for instance, this individual is a cashier. Are there any stores in there? They could use a cashier? Maybe, but I'm too old. Well, how old are you? Oh, I'm about 37. Okay, but do you have some skills they might be able to use? Not really. Well, you've been a cashier. How many years here? 4. Well, you have skills. Don't exaggerate. The fact that your family, if the immigrant has to leave their family here, in almost all situations, there's going to be a loss of income. That's ordinary. That's average. Even if it's a lot of income, it's sort of an ordinary issue. It's what they do with that income and what you can bring back to the U.S. Will you be able to earn any money, cover yourself, or will your spouse have to send money over to your home country and have to support you? And that takes away from your children here. It takes away from your family here. Think about it carefully. Don't exaggerate. Tell your story, but don't exaggerate. If it doesn't matter, because your case is built on a bunch of pebbles, a bunch of evidence. You don't need a big rock. You don't need to be totally destitute. You don't need to be totally hopeless. You just need to have a strong hardship case. And that doesn't mean that you have to exaggerate reality. Because I'm pretty sure, as Mr. Corral told me, you have a special story. Your family has a special story. You just need to develop the evidence to explain it. Tip number 8. I'm going to wrap up with this one. Be cautious when you're selecting an assistant to work with. Like the individual I told you about, my first case in Riverside County. That wasn't the right individual for him to go to. That's real clear. This person was clueless. There was no communication. They weren't working together. Be careful. Individuals that guarantee you victory, no way. Individuals that tell you it's a slam dunk, that it's easy, no way. Lawyers, assistants that are dedicated can make your case stronger, but they can't guarantee it. They don't have pixie dust. They have nothing magical. So take these 8 tips, put them inside your mind, inside your soul, as you get ready to embark on the 601 venture. And they will bring you many steps closer to success. And with that, I want to wish you and your family, your children, your community, the best of luck. Take care. Thanks for watching. Know someone who might be interested in this video? Then please take a moment to like and share it with them. Also, if you would like more videos on immigration, just click on the subscribe button. And here's a little bonus, a short guide that you can download for free by clicking on the link on the description box or the square-shaped image. Plus, if you have ideas for videos you'd like to see, write a short comment below or feel free to contact me at carlos@VitaraImmigrationLaw.com. My name is Carlos Vitara. I appreciate your time and hopefully we'll be talking again very, very soon.